Hello, my name is Ariana, and this is Miss Church, and I'm going to be asking her about what happened on the day of 9/11 because I was not alive. So, Miss Church, can you explain to me, what happened? What did you see?
Okay, so for me, I was at home in the morning and it was like the routine to watch Good Morning America back when they actually talked about like news and not like lifestyle stuff. And so I came out of the hallway and my husband was watching it and I was like, why did you turn off Good Morning America? What's happening? What is this weird movie you're watching? Right? Because I can see the Twin Towers and there's just smoke just spilling out. I'm like, what movie is this where they crash into the Twin Towers? He's like, this is not a movie. This is what's happening right now. And I'm like, what? And he's like, no, this is like a plane just hit the Twin Towers. And so as we're watching it, like I sit down and I have my son Magnum and he's just a little baby. And I sit down on like the coffee table and I'm watching it and he's in my lap. And as we're watching it, the second plane hits the tower and like everybody in our house just like stopped. And you could, I lived in Hanford at the time. So like we could hear NAS just going crazy. Like you could hear the planes taking off. And it's a good 15 miles at least from NAS to Hanford where I lived, and we could hear it. And like all day long, that's all the news was. And like the whole world it just stopped. Everything just stopped. There was like outside was just totally quiet except for the airplanes. And you couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't everything was shut down. You couldn't get on a plane. You couldn't get on a train. Like the buses stopped running, like everything just, the world literally stopped that day for our country, obviously. And I just remember like my kids and thinking, this is, when you're watching it and you're thinking, this is this horribly tragic thing and it's changing our world and what we've experienced since then. So like how you said, you have no recollection before 9/11. So when I was a little kid, we'd go to the airport and we could walk right up to the gate and like our parents could put us on the plane by ourselves. As a little kid, I flew by myself across the country, like
I could never.
across the country. And so like we could go in the airport and you could walk right up to the gate and there was no like clearing security there was security, but it was not like it is now, like not standing up, like, there was none of that. Traveling was a lot easier. We just came and went. Before 9/11, I'd gone to Canada and Mexico several times. No passport, just back across the border, no problem. Now you have to have 7 forms of ID, some special security passcode.
Yeah, it's so complicated. Like I've flown to Seattle, Florida, and then I have to go through like 60 stages of like metal detecting and making sure I have nothing in my bags and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, and I'd gone to Europe with my oldest son before that and like traveled with stuff and no problem. We just got on the plane and, went and yeah, you don't just go to Europe anymore. You have to yeah. So like, and you wait longer times for everything. Like literally we would walk up to the air terminal in Fresno and just walk right up to the gate like it was nothing and like give the stewardess our little paper tag and, oh, you're here? Okay. You're who you say you are. No.
It takes like an hour. Like you have to be there like 2 hours before your flight leaves now because there's such a complicated process to get actually to the terminal.
I think we felt like, we hadn't, like our country hadn't experienced anything like that since 9/11. I mean, since Pearl Harbor. Mm-hmm. So I had no concept of anything like that. There was never like a war on our territory, right? There was the bombing of Pearl Harbor and, that was as close as it ever got to like the home front, right? Mm-hmm. So then that made it like, oh, this is real. Like, this is the next level. This is what we are really going to have to combat people from our home front. Like our coastlines and our borders are, extremely vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And we only saw that they were extremely vulnerable from the air because the military boats like began moving out immediately. Like the Navy, just everybody. It was like a whirlwind. And for the next week, that's all you did. Like, well, that's what we did, I should say. Like everybody sat around watching what was happening on the news and the response and, you know, who did this, who organized it. And then, you know, and then the trickle of all the information, right? Like all of the connection to Ollie North, all the connection to all the stuff in the 80s, the, you know, all of it just, and everybody started putting all the pieces together and this, you know, and then it escalating into like full blown, like, you know, more than one form of war in the Middle East. And it's been I don't want to say fun, it's been an event ever since then. And so now our entire lifestyle is completely changed because of that one thing, right? I think the other thing that was really surprising was the idea of taking a bomb on a plane, you know, like and then as the day was going on and you hear about like they've hijacked not just one, not two, but 4 planes. And so they're crashing in near the Pentagon, they're crashing, you know, and then the people in the plane in Pennsylvania taking over the hijackers and essentially like force landing the plane into this field and so many people losing their lives. So then when my son was in junior high, he went to New York and DC and they got to go to the memorial for the Twin Towers. And he was like, Mom, it's just like a massive kind of like hole in the ground, right? And then the fallout from all of it, right? Mm-hmm. All of those first responders and them getting sick and what happened afterward and how they were not cared for and how, you know, all these people in New York, the devastating health effects and rebuilding New York and what it took and the way it changed the skyline and the way it changed all of everybody's feelings about New York. It was just different. Like, it was just different.
It's sad. Like that actually makes me sad.
It is. I mean, it was horribly sad. Yeah. You know, it was like one of those just atrocious moments in history where you just, you know, your life has changed forever that very moment. And those aren't very common, right? Like my dad says the lunar landing and JFK, he remembers those. And obviously he remembers like the Vietnam War and things like that, but like that one monumental catastrophic event and now yes, and now COVID, it's been catastrophic to our lives in a similar way. Mm-hmm. Now here we are doing it this way instead of you and I having a discussion in the classroom.
Well, it would be. I'd be in there every lunch. So
I'm here most lunches.
That sounds so lonely and sad.
No, not really. I mean, you know me. I'm like, why are all the people here? But at the same time, like, it is very different to host class from an empty room with a screen. Like, yeah. Do you know how hard it is to do the coffee filter lab virtually?
I saw that post on Twitter and I was like, how is she going to do this? How is this possible?
Yeah. It's, you know, and everything takes 4 times longer than it should. Yeah.
Like, wanting to reach through a screen and strangle someone is a common theme.
And just go.
I know. I'm like.
He's running out now. I think he's taking a phone call. He's just going to edit it anyway. Like, what does your dad say about it? Like,
about what?
9/11.
Oh, I've never really heard my dad's side of the story, but I've heard my mom's side, and I think she was already watching TV like you were, but they switched the channel, and she just, like, felt fear just, like, kind of overcoming. I think he was at work Or
most, it was really early in the morning here when it happened. And most people, I think, were really like I said, I had no idea. I was like, why are you watching this movie? What is this? Like,
yeah.
what is happening? And I'm in my late 20s and I'm like, what? This is bizarre. What are you doing? And like, no, this is what's really happening. We've been attacked. And I'm like, what do you mean we've been attacked? And he's like, they hijacked a plane and they drove it into the tower. I'm like, okay, well, and when that second plane hit, it was just mass chaos. Like we were sitting there on the coffee table and, well, I know some favorable and choice words, right? And I was just like, just happened. Like, you're just like, wait, it's just like, because they were, and the part that, like, they have camera stations for the news across the river. And so you just see this airplane just, and you're just like, wait, there's another one. And wait, what's happening? You just like, this can't be real. Like, it really can't be real.
Hello, my name is Jamie Maga, and we're here to reflect on what happened during 9/11. And I actually wasn't born during that time, and I wanted to know and learn from a person who was actually there during that time. So, Mr. Rodriguez, you can help me and give me your recollection what happened on 9/11.
All right, Jamie. Well, thank you for the question. Well, 9/11 was definitely what I call a life-changing event for me as a person, but as most importantly as a citizen of the United States. On that day, I remember vaguely, like waking up, everything was a normal day. When it really changed and really hit is when my mom actually called my grandmother's house, because at the time I was living with my grandmother. And I was getting ready to go to college. So I was getting all my stuff ready and, I'm going to head out for the day. And my mom was actually going to pick me up and give me a ride to MJC, because that's where I was going to school. It's college. So at that point I was like, all right, what's going on? She's like, yeah, come over. You got to check this out. A plane crashed into the World Trade Center. And to me, it was just, it was an accident, right? People are obviously going to die, but I didn't understand the severity of it at that moment, right? Because to me, it was a plane crash into the World Trade Center. Those things, accidents happen, right? Mm-hmm. So I ran across the street and, and I get over there and everything, the cameras, obviously the helicopters are going around the World Trade Center, and they have a very good video of it taking place. And I was like, okay, no big deal. Well, 30 seconds later, after I'm standing there, the second plane crashes into the World Trade Center. And that was when I think reality kicked in, that this wasn't an accident, because you think the probability of two planes crashing into the World Trade Center. And at that point, I was just in a state of shock. Like, I was like, whoa, people have died, and this is a lot of people. This is, in my mind, I'm always about numbers. So I said, there's probably at least 1,000 to 2,000 people dead because of this. And so I'm sitting there, and I actually had to take a seat. I was like in a state of shock. And my mom was just, she actually started crying. She goes, oh my God, what's going on? And I said, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I mean, we're looking at each other, and so I'm, about an hour later, they're talking about how they're having to ground all the flights. And I was tripping out. I was like, they're grounding all the flights. And then, a certain time after that, they start to talk about how there's missing flights that they weren't able to get in contact with. And then, a little bit after that, the Pentagon gets hit. Then I knew that this was intentional. And I think the most impactful moment of the whole situation was, as they were broadcasting it live, I saw a person jump out of the World Trade Center. And that to me was just, that's when it really hit. It was like, whoa, this is not cool. And then eventually they did come down. And at that point I knew a lot of people had died. And you didn't know exactly who it was, but you figured, it was a form of terrorism. That's all I knew. I didn't know anything else. So it was a life-changing event. I mean, I tell people, when you reflect upon it, a lot of my strong emotions come from it because it was a sad day in our history. We historically speaking, besides the Civil War, and a couple of the wars, we hadn't really been attacked on our home front. You had Pearl Harbor, but we really had not been attacked like that. So it was a sad day. It was a sad day.
And at that time, you spoke about the flights being shut down. Did you have concerns after 9/11 of traveling with airplanes?
Well, I mean, at the onset, I did not do a lot of traveling. Why? Because I didn't have money to travel. Now that I'm older and I do a lot of traveling, I think in the back of my mind, it's just knowing my surroundings, and then just being patient too. When I go from airport to airport, when they do require certain inspections, I don't, get upset. There's people who get really upset, but I don't. I understand why it takes place because I remember that day. And there was, a matter of fact, a point in my professional career where I thought I was going to actually be a U.S. Air Marshal, because I thought that would be a good career and that I could do good for society. But then I realized it requires a lot of flying and not a lot of time with your family. And I've always been big about my family. So I decided that I wasn't going to go that route, but it has changed the way in which I travel. And then I think, in terms of my future, I'm hoping that we still have a strong government presence at our airports, and that our, intelligence community is still strong. That includes our military, because they're the people that are getting a lot of that information and keeping us safe. So I'm a big advocate for them to continue to, support us and protect us.
On 9/11, that day, what was the day like after everyone had seen the news? How were people reacting, and how did the world change that day?
Well, I can tell you everything shut down at MJC. I do remember my mom and we got in our car and we were on our way. She was on her way to work and she was going to drop me off at the community college. But we actually turned around halfway because I ended up getting a message from one of my instructors, an email saying, hey, we're not having, not even an email, it was actually a phone call, I think, that I ended up getting. There would be no class that day. And so at that point I was like, what? No class. And so the rest of the day was just watching TV, believe it or not, because we wanted to know what happened, right? And we wanted to see our political leader at that time bring a sense of comfort that, we would get through this. And George Bush did do that for us. And, I know that it was a bad moment in our history, but I think as a country we united and we came together and we tried to provide the most amount of support for each other. But that day, it was a sad day, the remainder of the day, because you started thinking about all the people who had died. And then you start to think about, like, for example, the firefighters who went in, and that they didn't come back because, once they collapsed, anything that was close to the World Trade Center, for a fact that they were dead. So, and then the search and rescue, efforts that took place, that was something that I was also, very hooked on, I guess you could say. But it was a very sad day after that.
Is there anything you want to add about how the event on 9/11 personally impacted your life?
You know what? On a personal level, I think I sought to understand other people, not just solely us, but why did this occur, right? To research, to think outside the box and say, hey, this took place, and not to justify it in a positive way, because that it was never justifiable. But why did this happen to us, right? And then trying to comprehend how these variables are outside of my realm, right? Like, I mean, all I can do is with what's in my realm. But when something like this happens to you and it impacts you, you think, well, what do I need to do not only to be a better citizen, but to essentially seek to understand why this took place. And so I think that in itself, kind of in my geography, when we talk about the Middle East and we talk about, the different revolutions that they've had and the different types of, Muslim denominations that they have, and, their differences with Christianity, and you seek to understand, why things like this happen. And I think my mindset has always been like, I don't make that generalization that every person from the Middle East is like those terrorists who did that. They have a beautiful culture, and I just hope that, with time things do get better and there's better opportunities for the people who live in those countries, and that they don't see us in a negative light. So, but more than anything, it's just being informed and educated. That's changed me a lot. Having more of a global view about those types of events.
Right. I think I'll ask, how do you think the world has changed? Well, I guess the U.S. has changed in terms of like safety, or I guess in all aspects after 9/11.
Well, it's definitely, I think, has taken more of a proactive approach to, trying to create a lot of prevention, trying to prevent these from things happening. I know that different institutions have, in terms of like counterintelligence, in terms of flight safety, in terms of, like getting information about where you're traveling to. All of those things have, I think, improved our experiences overseas. But at the same time, I think as a capitalistic society, what's happened is that because we're so motivated by profit, sometimes those countries that we go and we do these negotiations with, sometimes that wealth that we hope to create for those other populations don't necessarily get that wealth. It's only amongst very few people in the population. So that, to me, I think as a country, I think we're a little bit more cognizant about the deals that we make overseas, to ensure that the money is going towards people who support our values and ideas. Yeah.
Hey, this is awesome. You guys nailed it. I'm going to go away again, but this is perfect. If you guys could like kind of just close the interview. Is that cool? Jamie, did you have any more to add or to ask?
That's great. Yeah, that's good.
No, that's awesome. All three of the interviews today were like phenomenal. I'm so glad I did this because it's a cool perspective, because these kids, they weren't alive when it happened. They
true.
They don't know the world before 9/11. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
they don't know that
true.
world at all. So it's kind of good for them to kind of get, what happened, and I don't know. This is really awesome. Awesome, guys.
All right.
I'm gonna go away. Go ahead and end the meeting, end the interview, and just send me the videos, please. Put them in your Google Drive and then share them with me.
Alrighty.
All right.
Okay, cool. Jamie, do you have my email?
Yes, I do.
You have it. Okay. All right. Cool. Thanks, you guys, and I'm gonna go. Bye-bye.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Awesome.
Were those okay questions, Mr. Rodriguez?
Yeah, those were perfect questions. I think you nailed it, and I think it's to give people a better insight into what took place that day, because you have to have that primary source, right?
Yeah, exactly.
For you guys, I was a primary source. I was there. I was living it. So that in itself was definitely life-changing. And but one of the things that I value about our country is that we were able to come back and better those areas of opportunity that allowed those people to attack us, right? Things that, loopholes, and because you start to think about the amount of training that these guys had, right? You can't just get into a commercial jet and expect to fly it, right?
Yeah.
It was a very well organized plot, and so how do we prevent those things from happening, right? And so, but I don't know. I mean, as a country, we've gotten a lot better in terms of that, protecting ourselves in that form. But I can tell you right now, I mean, there's a lot of other things happening. So it's like we just have to be, up to the challenge. And as long as we're up to the challenge and we're continue to innovate and think ahead of everyone, then we'll be good as a country.
I agree.
Yep.
Always room for improvement, right?
Yep. That's the heart of things, and you don't want to get caught up with the same thing over and over, right? You want to get things better. You want to make things better. So that's why I think at our school we do a phenomenal job of giving the kids that opportunity to better, right? Like we say, yeah, this is good, but let's make it better, right? Let's come up with an innovative idea. Let's do some of that design thinking together. So that's what, yeah. But anyway, well, Jamie, I think that's it, right? I think.
Oh, do we need to do a closing?
It's up to you.
I think we can do a closing. Okay.
All right. What's the last question?
Oh, I think just like say our names. Like I'll say again, I'm Jamie Maga, and thank you so much, Mr. Rodriguez, for taking the time to tell your account of what 9/11 was for you.
Hey, thank you, Jamie. I really appreciate it. As a primary source, right? As we think about like in a historical context, I was a primary source because I was there. It was a sad day in our history, but I think as a country we unified and we became better. And so that's what I am most happy about is that even though it was a sad day, we as a country we have grown, and we continue to grow as a country, and we unified ourselves at that point in time. So, but beyond that, thank you for the interview.
Thank you.
Basically, I guess I just kind of want to start off and ask, where were you? Let's
Where
start there.
Okay, so on 9/11, it's like it was yesterday. I was in my house. I was getting ready to go teach at Yosemite Middle School. I'd been there for several years. My oldest was just over 1 year old. And I was standing in my living room with her. And I remember my husband coming in, which was weird because he had gone off to work, and he came back and he said, "Turn on the TV. There's something happening. You need to see it." And so that's where it started. Wow.
So I guess that's kind of something that you hear about often, is that it's one of those momentous events where people, they will always remember where they were. Can you speak to any personal impact that 9/11 had on you as a person, or, kind of throughout the duration of the event and then the aftermath? What did that look like in your shoes?
It was frightening because being attacked on your own home soil, that was a first. I mean, since Pearl Harbor, right? But Pearl Harbor was in Hawaii, which is way off on the island. So this was a mainland attack on U.S. soil. And I thought to myself, as they were reporting it, because you didn't know how many planes were in the air. As far as we knew, it was just the Twin Towers. And then all of a sudden it was the Pentagon, and then the airplane in Pennsylvania. And you weren't sure if that was it, if it had finished, if it was over, or if there were more coming. So it kind of made you aware, but we were so far away. Being in California, it wasn't personal. It was kind of far. So, I mean, it was terrifying, but not right at your doorstep.
Right. Yeah. And then, like you mentioned, Pearl Harbor, despite being in Hawaii, it's still home soil. And then that was, 70 years between almost.
Mm-hmm.
Basically that huge, gap in time.
Right.
So I guess, did you notice any major changes in society after the event, like before?
Oh, yeah. So it was very interesting. Immediately, I could feel the backlash against anybody who was considered of Middle Eastern or actually, Eastern Asian descent. People were saying things that were derogatory and it was very disheartening, because that's not what we're about, and that's not what I ever thought that's not the angle that we should have gone in. There were people who were very angry about it, and terrorism it's not a formalized war. It's not anything that has ever won a war. So you can't put your finger on it. That's why it's terror, right? Because you don't know exactly where it is or when it's going to strike. And there's such small groups of people that are in that mindset. And you don't know where it's going to come from. It could be anybody. It doesn't have to be from a certain part of the world. Anybody can be a terrorist. And we've had our own terrorists from our own country perform horrific acts right here on our, at home. And so that was very disheartening when people wanted to kind of draw these lines. Like, you can't put things in boxes like that.
Right. So. No, absolutely. I feel it is rather connected to nowadays. We're kind of experiencing and witnessing a lot more domestic terrorism, particularly with, younger individuals seem to be a huge group. However, I guess following, you say that there's a lot of derogatory slurs and a huge, kind of a mass change in mindset towards one particular ethnic group.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see those effects to this day? Have you seen any kind of, mediation in those effects?
I don't think that, in my personal opinion, there needs to be a lot of reckoning that Americans need to do. We have a past, and we have not even come close to reckoning what our own past is. And it's easy to point fingers and say, you did this. But when it comes, when you really think about where your mind is at and really do the soul searching that you need to do to figure out who you are in the world, you really have to look inside as well and understand that we're all deserving to be at the table. We're all deserving to be a part. We're all deserving to have what the American promise really is.
So pertaining to more of an optimistic mindset, would you say that the events of 9/11 kind of acted as a wake-up call for, the societies around the world to kind of begin working towards social integration and diversification and understanding one another more?
The whole idea of empathy is difficult for people because it means that you're not exclusive anymore, right? You have to be able to put your own personal wants and needs aside and understand that other people have the same thing, and then be able to understand their perspective and empathize with their perspective. That's super hard to do, right? Because we're all working so hard and we all feel so deserving. So how do you get to that mindset where you want to share as well as partake? And it's the whole reason why I started teaching, especially government economics, because it's the mindset of, economics, we talk about what is scarcity. Is it, I'm just going to get mine, or am I going to make sure that everybody has some? That's a completely different way of looking at scarcity. So how, it's the same thing with citizenship or liberty or freedom of speech or anything that's considered a freedom. I want my freedoms, but you can't have them because I feel this way about you. And that's not what we're about. That's not what this is about. And so really thinking about, how do you parse out this idea of liberty, and how do you make sure that people are safe and feel valued and feel a part of? This is huge, and it's always going to be a struggle because there are people who are, what is your mindset? Do you look at the glass half empty, or do you look at the glass half full? And those things can make all the difference in life for you, right?
No, absolutely. Having an open mindset really can alter things. So I guess one other topic that kind of I feel like we should cover is security after 9/11. Particularly something that comes to mind is the integration of TSA and their more stringent procedures.
Mm-hmm.
So besides, TSA airport security, some trivial things like that, what, from someone who has experienced coming out both sides, pre 9/11, post 9/11, is how would you say that our society has changed to kind of adapt to the threat of terrorism as a whole?
Well, I think, because I travel quite a bit, and I don't just travel in the United States, I travel abroad as well. And we've become a global society, which is good because we begin to understand each other so much better. And now we see that everybody in the world, and our cell phones now can broadcast instantaneously things that are happening, within 5 seconds of when they happened. It can be up and on the air and people can see it. So it is real. I mean, we have made this world very, very tiny by having this idea of information, right? That's so instantaneous. And in that comes a huge responsibility because things are not secure. Your from your cell phone and what's inside your cell phone to getting on a plane and flying somewhere. How do you make that secure, right? How do you make it secure?
Right. I mean, that's
the
still an
other
ongoing
thing is,
question.
how do you make it private? What is privacy anymore? And so these are big questions that your generation is going to have to tackle, because as things go on, what is going to make you feel safe? In the pandemic, there are people who are, there was a huge movement toward living in a city because that's where all the action is. And now all of a sudden it's the exact opposite. People are moving out of cities because they're so afraid. So, where is that happy medium? We have climate change. We know that there are climate refugees. They're moving away from the coast because the water is rising. And we know all these things and we have all this information, right? And how we choose to react to it is going to make all the difference in the world. Do I feel less safe today than I did pre 9/11? No. I feel more safe today than I did 9/11. And the reason being is that I have information now and I have access to information now that I never did before. I mean, I grew up in a world where there was no internet. I grew up in a world where you type papers on a typewriter. Yeah. I grew up in a world where you had to go to the library to do your research. So information now is key, and to have good information and understand how to get good information. Always checking your sources, always finding out what's true, because it's really easy to manipulate people into thinking something completely not true. And so,
absolutely.
Yeah, and that's something that, again, your generation is going to have to figure out. How do you get at the truth? What is the truth, right? And to understand that truth for you might be something very different for somebody else from a different perspective. So it's but again, I still feel safer now than I did before.
I would definitely say that's a good step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
You did bring up privacy, which is definitely an interesting concept nowadays. Is people are embracing this idea of the Internet of Things and whatnot. Mm-hmm. How do you think that'll affect just kind of future threats and our ability to diffuse them?
Well, as your technology gets better, so do the people who want to create chaos, right? So it would be nice if we could develop a world where there isn't the need for somebody to develop chaos, right? Mm-hmm. So as we get better and better at making people healthier, maybe that'll get people to sow less chaos, right? As we develop a world that has empathy and understanding for one another, maybe those who want to sow chaos will be less and less. So the more you, like I said, the more you include people into this idea of being a part of, to be seen, right?
Thank you so much for speaking with me. It was definitely interesting to see your point of view on things, and we definitely appreciate having that perspective to kind of inform our younger viewers.
Yay!
Myself included. I was born post 9/11, so there's that.
All right, cool. Thanks.
No, for sure. Thank you.
It was fun.